Hello everybody and welcome to Powerful Women's first Spotlight webinar. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Georgina Worrell and I'm the head of Powerful Women, and I'm delighted that you could join us this morning. Just a couple of housekeeping rules from me before I pass over to Craig Shanaghey. This meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded onto Powerful Women's YouTube channel. And if you want to ask a question, please do put your question in the Q&A. We hope that you're going to enjoy this really interesting conversation, and I will pass over to Craig.
Thank you, Georgina. Can I just confirm that you can hear me okay? Perfect. So good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. As Georgina said, my name is Craig Shanaghey. I'm the Executive President for Projects at Wood. I'm also a member of the Energy Leaders Coalition, with a theme for this year being engaging the majority whilst spotlighting the minority. These webinars are an opportunity to spotlight women making a positive impact in the energy sector, and I am delighted to be joined today for the first of our webinars by Leigh-Ann Russell. I'll ask Leigh-Ann to introduce herself in a second, but fair to say we are setting the bar high from the outset, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion. So Leigh-Ann, with that, do you want to kick us off by, first of all, introducing yourself and then maybe giving us a brief overview of your career to date?
Yeah, thank you, Craig. You set the bar high for me there, so I'll do my best to live up to that during the session today. So hi everyone, I'm Leigh-Ann Russell. I'm Executive Vice President at BP. I'm accountable for technology and innovation. That includes engineering, science, and all our digital sciences, IT and cybersecurity. I grew up in Aberdeen. I'm a mechanical engineer by background. Have spent just past 27 years in the oil and gas and now energy sector, and delighted to be with you all today.
Thanks, Leigh-Ann. So let's get into the conversation. Can I take you back to that early start on your career journey? So what attracted you to engineering, and how easy a transition was it for you into university and then ultimately into a job?
I would love to have some really big words of epiphany here around how I got into engineering. I grew up in a council estate in Aberdeen. I was the first in my family to attend university, so that was in itself a little odd. I actually started off life as an apprentice in a bank, and I didn't enjoy it. It wasn't what I thought my life ambition might be. And when I got my higher results, A-level equivalent results in, I decided I would go to university, and I kind of couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. And what I loved about engineering was it was a bit of everything. It was a bit of science, but it was a bit of language, it was a bit of creativity. And so therefore I thought this was my my calling in life. My parents weren't quite as delighted as I was, because being an apprentice in the Bank of Scotland was a big deal for our family. And when I said I wanted to go to university, their idea about university was it was for either rich people or hippies. It didn't help when I said I wanted to study engineering, which was not a subject for girls. However, I have a great family who supported me into university. It was tough, I'm not going to lie. Being at university, I funded myself through university, which often meant working full-time and juggling a full-time degree and a full-time job. A lot of people at university had come from a very different background from me. I found it hard to settle in, but ultimately got my degree, ended up working in the energy sector. I absolutely loved it, and every single day, most days since then, work has been my calling, and I've thoroughly enjoyed just the diversity of stuff I've been able to do as part of being in the energy sector.
So many parallels and so many ways we could take the conversation, which is great. Maybe the first thing that we'd pick up on, you mentioned there you didn't really know what you wanted to do, and I think that's, I would think, common with a number of individuals. And you talked there about barriers or perceived barriers. Who were the role models back then to guide and to steer you in order to make those initial steps that have actually led you to where you are today?
Well, I think the first is my dad. And so my dad, he's quite ill at the moment, so it's quite hard for me to talk about, but he was forever my inspiration, because my dad had two things in his life. He had work, and he worked 7 days a week, 2 jobs. He was a technician at Chevron Monday to Friday, and he ran a chip shop Saturday and Sunday. So my dad was all about work ethic, and he was equally about family, and it was all about family. He did very little for himself. And I really grew up just wanting to be like my dad. Hard work, work ethic, but at the same time, you know, that your entire essence of the rest of your life was about family. And I think it doesn't matter what journey and path I've taken in life. I think that is a really good role model for all seasons. You know, work hard, love your family, and that can be friends. You know, I think there's just so much in that for all of us to take inspiration from.
I couldn't agree more. So as a father to 2 daughters, if my daughter speaks so passionately about me as you have about your father just now, then I think I'll have won in life. And getting that balance between working hard and family for me is again a valuable life lesson and career lesson for anyone. You mentioned there about a female in engineering, so I'm going to pick up on that, because I'm guessing there's a number of people on the webinar today who have either went through or are going through similar challenges. Do you see the culture different today for females moving into engineering as it was for you starting out?
Well, first of all, Craig, in the short time I've known you, I can say I have no doubt your daughters are going to feel the same way about you as I feel about my dad. And so I would definitely take heart in that. How has the culture evolved? I'd love to say it was radically different than when I started. It was true that many of the drilling rigs I worked on back in the 90s, I was the first woman, definitely not on the rig, but definitely to work on the rig floor. It was very uncommon to have seen someone who wasn't a wireline engineer in the wireline shack or catering crew or something. So that I felt a little bit like a trailblazer then. But I think a lot of women joining the sector today are still blazing trails in so many different ways, maybe for different reasons. And some of the barriers that existed then, I was very, very fortunate to work for great managers and work with great colleagues. I never ever felt discriminated against. I never really felt like I was in a challenging place, which is not the case of other women who have joined various different sectors. But I was very aware of what we now know as microaggressions, just small things and small things said against me or my gender, or, you know, this can happen to any of us actually. And I think that if you are in a minority position today, and that gender can be one reason that you're in a minority, sadly, there's still these microaggressions, still these challenges of being a minority that face people today. I think the one thing that gives me hope, and the one thing that has really changed, is that there's a lot more discussion about it. You know, for example, as one of my side jobs, I lead some of our business resource groups inside BP. I used to be on our gender diversity team, BP Win. I now lead our groups for neurodiversity and social mobility. No one talked about neurodiversity and social mobility in the 90s, and I think the more that we talk about the challenges that face all the different groups that we have in society, the more that we'll be able to overcome them, and the better things we'll get for people.
I'm going to take that segue. I want to come back to your career, but just that segue on terms of that understanding. I certainly feel that the key to unlocking the potential in everyone is that key to understanding. It's the ability to be curious and to learn, the understanding in some instances your own bias, and listening without boundaries can really open up and allow people to maximize their potential. What's your experience in that respect, having been on? I guess you see some microaggressions, you see some minorities Do you feel we're getting better at listening? Do you feel we are curious enough?
Yeah, I think we've got ways to go, all of us, in that regard. I'll give you some of my mistakes that I made, so that I think, it's always best to learn from our mistakes. And I'll start with my daughter. So my daughter was diagnosed with ADHD a number of years ago. We went to the doctor. He said, yeah, you've got ADHD, here's a bunch of drugs. And I was not happy with that diagnosis. It felt like it was just too, here's medication, get on with your life. So I rejected the diagnosis. I didn't understand neurological issues, neurodivergency issues. And therefore I was like, you'll be fine, sweetheart, we can move on. And it was actually only towards the end of her A-levels where we really properly got a diagnosis, and she was really, really struggling with many issues, and now gets the proper support. And I wasn't a great mom, and I wasn't listening, and I wasn't leaning in on how to overcome those kind of challenges. Now I've learned, and I'm a passionate supporter for neurodivergency. She doesn't mind me talking about this. We did some videos. It's on my LinkedIn if you want to watch them. But, I was on a path of being very ignorant and being very closed-minded, and then that learning and listening. And there's lots of different areas today that I'm still learning. I'm getting reverse mentoring right now about the trans agenda, which is something I didn't fully understand. And I think you've put the nail on the head right there, Craig, is like we have to lean in to learn and educate ourselves. There's always something to educate ourselves. And the more that we can do that, I really think the better it will be for humanity. But there's still a ways to go. I mean, there's no doubt, even actually in 2024, we've gone backwards in some areas. Even in gender diversity, we've gone back. And you can see that on some of the stats that came forward at the end of last year around a slowdown of women joining boards and other things. So there's no doubt we've got some challenges, but I'm still optimistic because there's a lot of really great people in the world who want to make a difference.
I couldn't agree more, and I don't think there's going to be anything we disagree on today. But just picking you up in that, because it is, for me, it is in that understanding. I think it's incredibly brave. For the short time I've known you, and I'm looking at some of the stuff you've done online, I think that courage to be vulnerable and open yourself up, I think must be really inspiring for a number of people. I know from my own personal experience, I was similar to yourself in that respect. I've made mistakes in the past. Growing up in my early career, I probably didn't realise that I was in a privileged position, and I don't mean privileged from a financial perspective or anything like that. Like yourself, started out as an apprentice, and grew up in an Ayrshire council estate. But I wasn't the majority. I was a white male in the majority, and that tended to give you your own bias. Growing up in the 70s and 80s, and I failed to support people very close to me, and it's that failure that gives me the passion to try and do as much as I can to be as strong an ally as I can. And I've seen that from yourself, and maybe just building on that, and thanks for sharing the neurodiversity challenges your daughter's got. Going back to your career, that being a single parent and having those challenges, how have you coped with that, and what support have you had, and therefore how does that led to you, and how has it changed you as a leader in that respect?
So I think resilience has been a big theme in my life, and haven't always been sure that I'd overcome certain challenges that have faced me. And I think that's I think I saw something in the chat pop up there about imposter syndrome. I think one of the biggest challenges I've had in my life has been imposter syndrome. And some people have said to me that, that's impossible. You're sitting on the executive committee of BP. You're still relatively young. I like to think relatively young. You can't possibly have had imposter syndrome. That doesn't sound real, but it is really real, actually. And in many ways, it fueled me. And in many ways, it held me back because, when I went to university, I felt like everyone was more educated than me, had traveled more than me. I think someone said to me at my first week in, which countries have you been to, Leigh-Ann? I said, I haven't really been to any countries. And they said, well, that's you Scots, you're so insular. And it was actually like I spent my vacations working on the tills at Tesco's more than and we couldn't afford foreign vacations. So but then you start to kind of doubt your ability. And I think many bits of my life have played into that. So being a single mum, we don't talk about being a single mum because look at what the connotations of being a single mum are, being divorced, being, a female engineer. They all start to feel like real millstones around your neck. And there were so many bits of me that I hid about myself. And then I don't know what happened, but one day I kind of woke up and thought, these are not millstones around my neck. These are the stepping stones that made me who I am today. And so I reframed in my own head imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is when you're not comfortable. So I now think of it as I'm not comfortable because I'm in my growth zone. I'm just growing right now. So I don't feel good enough, but that's because I'm in my growth zone and I'm growing. And so I even then reframing how to think about imposter syndrome, instead of it being something that is a negative thing that I'm constantly trying to get over, I just think, no, it's fine. Of course I'm not comfortable. It's just because I'm growing, and I don't want to be back there. I want to keep challenging myself. And actually, one of my assistants once said to me, nothing grows outside the growth zone, Leigh-Ann. So again, some wonderful advice and feedback along the way. And as soon as I started to think about imposter syndrome in a different way, I felt liberated and lighter and able to cope with that in so much better ways.
I think it's a great analogy to have. So that change only occurs at the edge of your comfort zone. I think that's a really important thing for people, because people do wrestle with it, and I've had many conversations about imposter syndrome. Let me ask you a question, Leigh-Ann. This might help people in the webinar. In your senior positions, and you come across very senior people across and out with BP as well, what would you say is the percentage of people that you've come across that would openly admit that they've got imposter syndrome?
It is actually increasing. And I think that's back to our power about inclusion. Inclusion starts with talking about the issues. So I must admit, so we had our executive conference last year, and we were asked to give 7-minute TED Talks about ourselves, because not everyone in BP is such a big company. They don't know about all of us on the leadership team. So I got ChatGPT, because I'm a big tech geek, right? So I got ChatGPT to write my my speech for me, and I got DALL-E, which is the imaging AI tool, and OpenAI, to do the pictures for me. So what does a single mom look like? Horrific picture. What does a female engineer look like? Horrific picture. What does growing up in a council estate look like? Horrific picture. And I weaved in AI and also my life into this story, and I talked about imposter syndrome, and I talked about my daughter and neurodivergency. And it was just incredible how many people came up to me afterwards and said, I've been, and actually men came up to me and said, I really suffer from imposter syndrome, but I've never felt like I had permission to talk about it. Or my kid is probably on the spectrum, but I didn't really think it was a thing. And now I've got permission to go and think about that in a different way. So it was quite a high percentage, I'm not going to lie, of people who came and said, no, I feel liberated. And I think that's just the power of not hiding these things about ourselves, because as soon as you start to share and other people can connect to you, then there's real power in solving those problems together. So I would say, compared to 10 years ago when I first said the phrase imposter syndrome, I would say it's massively increasing, because it's just human nature for us. Honestly, I worry more about the people who don't have it in many ways.
I certainly see it as a superpower as well. Just going back to your own journey and understanding a bit about these things, how many of those barriers that you overcame were real barriers and how many of them were perceived barriers. So I'm thinking about people on the call who are probably looking at their career and saying, I can't do this because. As you started to break through those barriers, how much of that was self-limiting and how much of it was actually societal or within the workplace?
I'm going to say that most of it was in my own head. And that's quite brutal, and people probably don't want to hear that. But you know, I am a yogi. I'm a yoga instructor as well, and I do a lot of self-learning and in my own development. And I get a lot of challenge from people who have helped me on that journey to say, is that really what you believe, or is that in your own head? And I'll give you some examples of that. So back, and I'll try and anonymize these in case it offends the people who that might have directly affected. A bit over a decade ago, I was offered a really, really good operational job. I was operations manager in the North Sea, but this was a bigger job. And I just got divorced. My daughter was 6 years old. And I said, I can't do the job. Like, I'm going to have to focus on my daughter right now. I can't do a bigger operations job because I can't make morning calls at 7 a.m. And my boss said to me at the time, yeah, don't worry about that. We'll move them till 9 because you are the right person for this job. And I was like, nah, I can't do it. I'm either going to be 100% perfect or I'm not going to do it. And we debated and debated. And eventually I said, look, I'm really sorry. It's all about my daughter. I cannot do this job. So they hired someone to do the job who sat opposite me in the office. And he came in at 9 o'clock every day. And I said to him, oh, you must have childcare responsibilities. You know, how is it you come in so late? And he's like, yeah, I'm just not a morning person. And I could have felt bad about him, but it was me. I was the one who put all those barriers in my way. And here was someone who came in and took the job, wasn't a morning person, still did a great job, but you know, had more confidence in themselves just to go for it. And I think that was me holding myself back 100%. And that's kind of the advice I give to people that I mentor is, and you know, this is just a fact, right? Women will go for jobs that they feel 100% comfortable for versus men who will maybe take more of a punt on themselves. I mean, that's not me making up and being gender stereotypical. There's some science behind that. So how do we get everyone to be comfortable with like betting on themselves? Because at the end of the day, if we can't bet on ourselves, we can't expect other people to take a bet on us. So that was a big learning for me. And sometimes it is other people. You know, I have had people say to me, why don't you concentrate on finding a husband instead of finding a career? Because otherwise your daughter's going to end up being a drug addict. You know, and sometimes people have said other things like that to me. So I would say that it was, you know, I work on controlling the things that I can control. If people continue to say that to me, I just use that now to fuel myself even further, to help other people and help myself. But most of it, I think, if you really were to challenge yourself and ask that, and that's a great question, is this me? Or is this really something that I can overcome? I think when you get comfortable with challenging yourself in that way, it does unlock a lot of your own potential. And sometimes people are just suck also. But we can't do it. We can't make solve all of world peace.
But I think that's certainly true, and I'm quite sure there's loads of things resonating with the people, and I think we'll get some really interesting questions. But just something you said there about women not putting themselves forward and wanting to tick 70-80% of the boxes, etc. And your response there was, yeah, well, we just need to overcome that. I mean, a different perspective that I've got is that everyone needs to understand that that's a trait, and therefore as a male, I work quite hard at understanding, well, that's just what's going to happen. Therefore, work harder at teasing out that potential, and I think we would go a long way to breaking down those barriers. I'm getting a 5-minute warning, but I've got so many more things to ask, so I'm going to ask another couple of questions. So I think what's evident from this conversation, Leigh-Ann, is that some of the experiences you've had are super powerful, and your courage to share those are going to be helpful for a number of people. But if you took yourself back to a young Leigh-Ann, and I'm not saying that you're not young at the moment before anyone goes on the chat, what would you say? What advice would you give yourself, either starting out in your career now or at that mid-career stage where you had decisions to make and barriers to overcome?
Good question. I think on a practical sense, I would say be okay with outsourcing stuff in your life. I think for a long time, I got into a place where it wasn't just enough to work and be a mom. I had to make every meal from scratch at home. I had to bake at the weekend. You know, I set myself ridiculously unrealistic expectations about what being, you know, and I think it was because I was a working mom. I wanted to be the perfect mom, to prove I could be the perfect mom. And so I just kind of overwhelmed myself. And then I read some book back in the day about, you know, look how much money you earn and outsource anything that is less than you make. And so I got someone to cut the grass, and, you know, then I got a cleaner once a week, and freed up the time so that I could actually have a bit more harmony in my life. So I think there's a practical aspect of not trying to be a superhero. It's not good for you. It's not very inspiring for anyone else to look at you and think, I can never be like that person. So it's about role modeling as well. And then I think the more kind of profound thing was that I wasted a lot of energy in trying to overcome self-confidence issues and trying to overcome my imposter syndrome. And the reality is there's only so much energy each and every one of us have every day. And if you're spending your energy hiding that you're a single mom, or hiding that you're, you know, from a council estate, or hiding something about yourself, or hiding that you've got confidence issues, you're wasting a whole bunch of energy that could go into being a better mom, being a better dad, being a better friend, being a better employee. And as you rightly pointed out, I think with reflection, I did a lot of that to myself. So I would just encourage folks to say, like, how do I spend my energy? Am I wasting it on things that are out with my control, or can I actually redirect my energy into, like, you know, helping myself a lot more? So that would be my two big things I would go back and tell myself.
So really good advice, and maybe an add-on to that overview, Leigh-Ann. I'm guessing there'll be people on the call today who's saying, well, that's okay for Leigh-Ann to say that. She's in a really senior position now. I'm not in a senior position, therefore I feel I still need to hide some of those elements, either being a single parent or a different background. How do you give those individuals the courage to be as authentic and vulnerable as you've been, and what have you seen as the benefits of that as you've done that?
Yeah, I definitely always, like I said, didn't always have that courage, right? Especially when I was more junior in my career. I think all I would say was every single time I've revealed a bit more about myself, I've felt lighter personally. And I feel like, you know, like I said, that is a big suck of energy, and just being who I am is a much better place to be as a human being. And every time I've done it, and I'd have thought people would have behaved in a different way, they've actually behaved in a more positive way. So standing up and saying, I've got imposter syndrome to our 250 executives and BP, you know, many of whom I don't know, is a big thing. And actually the feedback I did get some feedback where people said, you can't possibly have that. That's not relatable. That's okay. People are entitled to that point of view. The vast majority of feedback I got was, I really appreciate you sharing. I'm struggling with it too. Can you help me? And I've never, ever, 99.9% of the time, when I've shared something about myself, other people have then shared back, and it just makes some momentum on us all being able to live in a more inclusive world. So I would say you have to do it when the time is right for you. I'm not suggesting that you go out there and do something you're not comfortable with, but my own experience, no matter how frightening it has been to get there, has always been super positive, both for myself, but also for the community of people around us.
Fantastic. So we're at the top of the hour. I'm going to pass over to Georgina to do the Q&A. Before I do so, massive thanks, Leigh-Ann. I expected we would have an easy chat. I've got so much more that I could have asked, but let me thank you for your honesty, your vulnerability, and your authenticity as a leader and on this call. And I think you're a fantastic role model for everyone. And good luck with your ultra marathon next week.
Thank
Georgina.
you. I appreciate that, Craig.
Hi, Leigh-Ann. Really interesting conversation. I loved the concept of growth zone. I'm going to use that now in my terminology instead of imposter syndrome. But yeah, we've had a few questions come in, and please, those online, please do continue to submit your Q&A. We've got about half an hour for questions. So the first question is, how to deal with a bully at work? Is it okay to reach out to HR and follow on the concerns through official routes? How to encourage the team of being okay to stand up and not fear being tagged as a troublemaker?
Oh, well, I'm really sorry if you're experiencing this right now. I have been in similar positions in my career, and I know it's really, really, really debilitating. It is never okay to be bullied at work. Like, for me as a leader, it's a zero tolerance. If I see and hear that happen, then there will be a way and there will be consequences. And there's very few companies left in the world today that don't have a similar manifesto. So I would say 100% the right thing to do. If you can't go, if it's your manager and you can't go to them, can you approach their manager? And then, of course, HR is also a fantastic route. And a lot of companies also have whistleblower programs. Or I forget, there's so many different names in the companies that we work with, have these anonymous reporting programs that you can also go, and you should have confidence. They're usually run by third parties, that you can also raise that. But generally, HR is a really also great place to start. You know, you're spending most of your life at work. It's not okay to have a culture of fear. I think one piece of advice, and HR would hopefully tell you the same thing, is just like document what's been happening, like write it down on a daily basis. This is what they said, this is what we experienced. But yeah, please 100% go and talk to either the line manager of the person or your line manager or HR or your employee anonymous reporting scheme. Don't live your life in fear. It's absolutely not worth it. It will eventually eat away at you over time, and you know, we need you to be healthy and strong. So I just want to say, if that's happening to you right now, I wish you massive luck and lots of courage and going ahead and tackling that. It is 100% thing to do.
And next question is, how have you built your confidence and business acumen over the years?
Small parts at a time. I think if you've read the book Atomic Habits, you know, you don't go out there and, you know, build a new skill. Well, some people can. I'm not quite in that IQ range. I think being curious is really important, and curiosity can be different at different stages in your life. So I very publicly talk about, I read a book a week. I listen to a lot of podcasts. My daughter's grown up and left school, so I have that ability to do that in my life. I did not have that ability when she was 2 and 3 years old. I could, you know, you barely make it through the week juggling work and momhood. So, but I did go for bite-sized learning back then. You know, you don't have to go for a full book, but could you do a 20-minute podcast a week? Could you track down someone in your company who has that knowledge and have a 20-minute coffee chat with them? I think that's a massively underused way of upskilling yourself at work. People love to talk about what they do. And quite often I'll just go and find someone who knows something that I don't and just say, hey, can we have a coffee? Can you explain quantum to me? Or can you explain finance to me, or that type of thing? And, you know, most people are just delighted to share and pass on their learning. But I think one of the great things about our modern age and social media is if you want to learn something in a bite-size, podcasts on Spotify, honestly, ChatGPT on OpenAI, while it's free, is absolutely phenomenal. Like, I was trying to teach myself electrolyzers, which are pieces of kit you need to make green hydrogen. Like, it's not, I had no idea about them, and I spent about 2 hours trying to educate myself. And then one day I went into ChatGPT and said, teach me electrolysis, and it was amazing. Came in a bite-sized chunk. And so, you know, don't try and feel like you have to boil the ocean. If you just make it, yeah, I'm going to spend 20 minutes on me this week learning something new, over your lifetime, that's going to add up to just a huge amount of knowledge.
And then in terms of, you mentioned books and podcasts, and actually one of the questions within this webinar is there a book that you would recommend for everyone to read that can help us build a better workplace?
Building a better workplace. I think my two favorite books around culture and inclusion, and I'm doing this from memory, so I might get them wrong. There's one called The Culture Code. I have no idea who that's by, but that was just, I just remember reading that and really explaining the power of culture at work. And the other one is, I don't remember the name of it, but it was written by the leader for the HR at Netflix. And they had written about how they created this amazing culture at Netflix back in the startup days. And you know, and it's slightly different from how we think about culture, but both of those books were really, really hugely learning for me, you know, particularly coming from an operational background. Let's be fair, I wasn't the best leader I always could have been as a driller. You know, I was often command and control, didn't have the listening skills that I'm still learning to have today. So those were the two books I would highly recommend that really emphasize how culture is important. And honestly, if there's one thing I believe today, I think it doesn't matter how great your strategy is, how great your products are, if you don't have the ability to help everyone in your team, and I mean that in your company, really connect to the purpose of what you're trying to do, feel empowered, then you're not going to be successful as a leader, or you're not going to be successful as a company. And that might be a slightly controversial view, but it's my view. And I'm not saying that my teams or my organization is anywhere close to that. But for me as a leader, that's job one, is like, really, how do we create the culture where people can come, be themselves at work, do amazing things and feel great about it, and go home at the end of the day feeling really fulfilled. That is my dream as a leader. That's what I'll work on every day until I retire.
And then in terms of juggling professional ambitions and being a mum, how did you get the right visibility at work?
That's a really interesting one. I never purposely went out to try and find visibility. I had a great piece of advice early in my career, which was, don't worry about networking, don't worry about visibility, don't worry about any of those, don't worry about which job, management, technical, but really just try and come into work every day and make a difference. And I would say that is been a massive piece of advice for me my whole life. It got a bit different when I became a leader, because then you have to pivot to how do you make a difference to your team versus how do you make a difference to you. But certainly early on in my career, so I stopped coming in and doing my to-do list and my emails, and I started to give myself 5 minutes every morning to think, how can I make a difference today? And I really, really measured myself on what I could do. And that, you know, you have to have at least a boss who's open-minded to that. But, you know, to give you my little story, I worked for a guy when I first joined BP who was a very strong operational leader, had a stay-at-home wife, very traditional person. And I worked 4 days a week for that individual. And very few people back in the day in operations worked part-time, and so BP decided to do a case study about me, and talked about how I managed to juggle 4 days a week, and then they asked my manager to give his view of how it was having an operational person work 4 days a week, and his first question was, "Leigh-Ann works 4 days a week?" So he hadn't even known that I was doing this, because all he could see that was I was delivering. And I think that permission to do anything in life starts with, delivering and not being seen or presenteeism. And that's the conversation to have with your line manager. And that's really how I've just tried, to knock it out the park every day in my best way possible, and showcase what I can do from a performance perspective. There may be better answers than that, but that's been my sole mantra since early on in my career.
And then another question, as some of your role models were managing offshore drilling and operations teams, how did you deal with travelling for work when you had a young child?
I massively fretted about it. Every single day that I wasn't with my daughter, probably back to that thing about what I said, I was an overwhelming perfectionist back in the day, which I would counsel myself to relax a little bit on. I didn't travel. I took over all my operational roles were largely when I elected to be, so I was in Aberdeen, and I elected to be in Aberdeen. I didn't travel that much. I went offshore occasionally, but it was more limited travel roles back when my daughter was young. I had in Aberdeen my parents, who were phenomenal. I had a village. There was a village. My ex-husband, my sisters, I did leverage the village, and that's really important. But I fretted a lot about being away when my daughter was young. My daughter doesn't remember me being away at all. Before the age of 8, she's literally got no memory at all. So all the times I was like, I'm away for a night, will my baby be okay? Again, back to Craig's point, was probably more in my head than actually the reality of life. Now, I have traveled as she's got older. I just really prioritized trying to travel on a Monday to Friday, and so that I was at least there for weekends all the time, and then making the time that I spent with my daughter about things that we did together, not just then I'm going to go and do my chores all weekend, but really prioritizing doing quality things with her. And I think she will say now, well, she does actually, I think it's on our LinkedIn videos, that yeah, she does recognize I was away, but actually all of that is counteracted by the fact that she now sees me being a kick-ass role model for her. And, at 18 years old, she says, "Mommy, I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of what you've done. I'm so proud that you help other women in your life." And so, yes, I wasn't there every day, but, I do think I've impacted her in different ways and positive ways. So if you're really struggling with that and having the guilt complex about am I present enough as a mother, just know, or a father actually, because it applies to every one of us as parents, just know that you're impacting your kids in really positive ways that will maybe offset you being able to be there for every single moment of their existence.
And being mother myself, I can really resonate with that. When my daughter was old enough, we sat down and agreed what was going to be the non-negotiables in terms of her school life. So it's things like we make sure that I and my husband are at all of her performances. I pick her up from school 1 day a week, but sports day and things like that we don't go to. So, but it's kind of identifying what's important to your child, that they want you to be there. So
I love that. I love that. And then I remember one of my non-negotiables was Friday morning. We did initially a little cafe run more when she was a teenager. Every Friday we went to Starbucks before school. And I could not care less what was happening in the office on a Friday morning, because we went to Starbucks every Friday morning. And there was times when my daughter said, "Mummy, all the parents are going to be there at the piano recital and you're not going to be there," that I have missed crazy important meetings to go to the piano recital. And I remember one boss telling me, you know, like, if you miss this meeting, it will be really damaging to your career. And I went to the piano recital. And when I shared that story with him 5 years later, he was like, there's no way I would have ever said that to you, Leigh-Ann. That's horrific. There's no way I would have ever said that to you. Like, he doesn't even remember. And yet I put myself through a massive amounts of pain because I prioritized my daughter and I thought my career was going to be over. And that was just an off-the-cuff comment that guy made. He didn't even remember 10 years later. And honestly, like, it didn't affect me. You know, so sometimes you have to make hard choices for your kids and understand what's important to them. And, you know, I'll be okay at work. And you know what? If it's not okay, there's other jobs you can go to also. So, yeah, that would be my advice.
So another question, what advice would you give to a middle-aged female who is re-evaluating future career options after juggling career and children, but children have now left home?
Well, I thought our children were leaving home this year. It turns out they were still all around. So I don't know if they're ever going to leave home. I was really morbid about this. My daughter decided to do a gap year. My partner's oldest son now lives with us, which is a real privilege that they choose to spend time with us. But it does resonate with me. I think it's just such a wonderful time of life. I think, you know, having done what you've done, having raised your children, to now have the real luxury of thinking about what is coming next. So a little exercise I highly recommend is, I read this book, which is around design thinking. So I don't know, design thinking just means like iterating on different options. It's a way of like doing projects, technical, in a technical discipline. But the guys who wrote the book from Stanford said they were asked so many times about how, so for career advice, they did this little book around how to design think your career. And it's a wonderful exercise. So it goes option A, option B, option C. And option A is imagine your life in 5 years' time, and it's perfect. It's like your dream life. And imagine your life. Option B is imagine your life in 5 years' time, and it's okay. And option C is imagine your life in 5 years' time and money was no object, i.e. won the lottery. And it has to be your life, your kids, your partner, your exercise, your faith, your all of the things that's important to you. And just have a little dream in each of those options. I went for a run and I drew some pictures. I've given people this exercise. They've done it on spreadsheets. I've had people do it with their partners. People do it with their families. And it's really amazing. Like, just have a dream. And then what's powerful about it is you end up with 3 different options and you think, and then you iterate between them. This is where the design thinking comes in. And you think, well, that is an option C, money is no object. But that doesn't actually require money. So why is that not an option A? And then you can start to get really, really clear. And this is a really great exercise to do when you're at a pivotal moment in life. And I think, you know, because I'm in a similar stage of life than you, and, you know, it's a different future than has been my last 18-year past. I think just giving yourself a little bit of time to think about what that future in each of those areas could be. And I think the most important thing is, do not allow yourself to get in a trap that being 50 is the end of your life. Lots of people at 50 have started their lives. You know, there's lots of people who started businesses, who filmed movies, who created startups, and you can Google them and you'll find them. I forget all the examples right now. You must go into that thinking that this is not, oh, I'm on a ramp down, but actually you're on a ramp up to something that can be really incredible, given that you've got much less responsibilities than you had for the last 18 years. So good luck with that. I think it's a really special time of life, and I hope you find a really amazing path forward.
Yeah, we had Eleanor Mills, the founder of Noon, speak at our annual conference in November, and they have a term for women who are 50 plus, and they call them queenagers, in exactly that thing, that they've still got a lot to give to society, the workplace and everything. So I love that term, queenager. That's definitely something I'm using as I move forward. Just to say, we've still got another 10 minutes, so please do continue to put your questions in the chat. But the next question is, do you find that people treat you differently, either inside BP, in industry, or in your social life since you became a member of the BP executive team?
I don't think so. Definitely not in my private life. I think, if anything, my family are tougher on me, you know, because I get that, oh, just because you're the boss at work doesn't make you think that you're the boss at home. I get that quite a lot if I overstep the mark in my with my partner and kids. And honestly, that is the greatest gift in life, to have people who hold that mirror up to you and tell you when you've overstepped the mark. And I'm truly grateful to my partner and my family, because they are those people for me. And sometimes I do need a bit of a reminder, because you get a bit busy, and you know, I can be quite short of time, and then I get quite short, and they're my greatest mirrors into how not to be anything but humble. And I do think there's a lot of people, I have a real gratitude for people in my team here at BP who also occasionally hold the mirror up to me if I'm not necessarily behaving in the way that I'd want to be. And I have people in my life, mentors, peers, who will also give me pointy feedback. And I think the greatest gift we can give ourselves is surrounding ourselves with people who will hold a mirror up to you. It can be very tempting, because leadership is lonely, to find people who will reinforce that you're a great leader, or, you know, give you some encouragement. And because sometimes you don't get that, it can be a little bit of, you can look for it and find a little bit of comfort in that. And I think, but honestly, the greatest gift we can give ourselves is surround yourself with people who'll be super honest, and hold that mirror up to you. And so I try to seek that out. And yes, I'm sure there are people who behave in a way that they think is because I carry a certain job title. At the end of the day, we all put our trousers on the same, trousers on the same way, and come to work in the same people. So I don't fully really believe in the hierarchy, but I think it's just a watch point for us all, and really seek out people who are going to really be your greatest allies, are people who are going to give you the toughest feedback.
And then, in terms of developing leadership, what are the skills you believe are the most important to develop for a leadership position? How did you decide this is the path for you?
I really didn't. I remember back a few jobs ago, I used to get this question a lot around, should you be technical or should you be leadership? And honestly, I would say that I don't see a distinction in the two, because to be great technically, you also need to have leadership skills. So if you're going to be in charge of a very great technical discipline, you need to know how to motivate people, you need to know how to run a budget, you need to know quite a lot of leadership skills. And I also believe if you're a leader, you need to have deep technical expertise. So when I went into my procurement job, and I didn't know anything about procurement, I spent a ton of time upskilling myself on procurement, got my SIPS qualification. Now I've come back into the technical world, and it's mostly digital. I'm doing data science bootcamp, which isn't going so well because I kind of haven't got the time for it, but I'm still trying to teach myself to code again. So I think the blurring, for great technical people and great leadership people, there should be a real blurring between technical and leadership, because I do actually think the skills become very, very similar for both. And I didn't decide on one. I decided to just continue to do things that made me happy in life, that made me excited in life. I've taken jobs that very senior people have told me not to take because they didn't think it was the right step, but I chose things where I knew I could really make a difference. And I choose jobs where I know I was going to get deep satisfaction. And I think that when you choose a path that gives you that kind of energy, you perform better. And when you perform better, you demonstrate yourself differently. So, and I just think, as Craig said it best, curiosity is everything.
The next question is, how do we encourage men to support empowering women in the workplace?
Well, many of the men I know are absolutely brilliant at this already. I think I'm beyond. I have more male mentors and more male supporters than I do female supporters. That's probably just the fact that there's still, many of the sectors that I'm involved in is still very male dominated. So I think honestly, men teaching other men how to do this is probably the most important thing, rather than women teaching men how to do it. And I think so, people like Craig role modeling what it is to be a great ally is the most powerful thing that we can have. And I think if we have people in our lives who perhaps aren't the best role models that they can be, it's a case of educating them. And I don't mean that in a condescending way, but if you look at my partner, he came from the energy sector. He's my best friend. He is my #1 fan, and he's my #1 supporter. He's also my #1 prodder when I go off track. But I came home with a book about I've just forgotten the name of it. It's about a book about how the world conspires against women, and it's like stats like crash test dummies are based around men, so women are more likely to die in a car crash, or heart surgery procedures are practiced on men, so women are more likely to have heart surgery complications. And and having supported me all these years, he picked up this book and read it in, I think, 2 days. Invisible Women, thank you. And he was like, wow, I didn't know how hard it was for you. So I think there's just this part of your own way, just helping some of your male colleagues who maybe perhaps don't see the challenges, just sharing data, sharing information, sharing the challenges that you face in that kind of way, I think can be really deeply helpful. And then I'm just going to give a shout out to Craig and all our phenomenal male allies who, without whom personally I wouldn't have made it to BP's executive team, and continue just to help me every single day. You are seen, and we are really, really grateful for you.
Sadly, we're slowly coming out to time. I've got one more question, and then I'll pass over to Craig just to close the webinar. So the final question is, do you think you need to be a specialist in one area to become successful? As my career has progressed upwards, I have a breadth of knowledge and keep being told I need to be an SME.
I believe there's no right path for anybody. I think being happy in life is, and especially as I get older, is the most important thing. And doing jobs that interest you and make you engaged is the #1 thing. And going and doing some sort of job because someone else tells you to, I would have had a completely different career, and I would not have enjoyed it nearly as much. I do think there's something about having a profession. Like someone once said to me, my profession really is in the Wells area, like get to being a manager. So if everything else goes off track, you can at least go back and be a completion engineer. I'm not sure anyone would hire me as a completion engineer now, but I was a really great completion engineer back in the day. And I think there is something about having at least one area of specialism that you can keep as your core and rely on. But equally, I think that lots of people will tell you there's only this path, or there's only this path, or there's only this path. And actually being really happy, making a difference, differentiating yourself through your performance will trump any path that anyone gives you in life, and is also a happier life. And at the end of the day, we only get 4,000 weeks in our lifetime. You kind of have to make everyone count in a way that is best for you.
So I think we've come to time now, so I'm going to pass over to Craig to just close the webinar. But from a Powerful Women perspective, Leigh-Ann, thank you so much for your time today, and it's been really informative.
Thank you for inviting me.
Echo that, Georgina. Phenomenal. And I would also encourage anyone in the call to read the book Invisible Women. It's a phenomenal book. It will make you frustrated, and check out the author as well. I was on a panel once with Caroline Crioda Perez, Force of Nature, and I thought she would be a tough act to follow, Leigh-Ann, but you've certainly followed her and surpassed her. I'm hoping everyone got benefit from that. What would be excellent is if you provide feedback. I'm not sure, Georgina, how we can get feedback, but it would be good for people to provide feedback so that we can maximise the benefit of these webinars. And I'll just note that the next Spotlight webinar will be held on the 25th of April at 3:30 p.m. with Maya Palucci, UK Country Manager for Angers. So with that, let me thank you once again, Leigh-Ann, and thank everyone for joining the call, and have a great week. Thank you.
Thank you.